excuse me, a lot of videos over the past several weeks have been of the new MacBook Air and MacBook Pro M1. And so far, Apple, you have done a bang up job. For what they are, and that's the key word here, for what they are, context is key. For what they are, these systems are just absolutely nuts. Okay, from what I've seen in videos, from what I'm hoping to experience with my own system, um, I'm really looking forward to this. I really, really am. But those are not the only systems that are going to be updated. The M1 is just an absolute beast, right? But it's not going to be the only Apple Silicon chip, and the M1 itself most likely will not be be just in the Mac Mini or the MacBooks, the low-end MacBooks. The next system a lot of people are thinking will be redesigned is going to be the iMac. And a lot of people are thinking that it might look similar to this. And for those of you who cannot see, this is the Pro Display XDR, a $1,000 display with a $1,000, or I'm sorry, no, well, wait, let me think. $5,000 display with a $1,000 stand. Obviously, the iMac wouldn't cost near as much, but the overall design, I think, is going to be similar. But I'm actually thinking about something even more outlandish. The Mac Pro. The Mac Pro is one of the systems that they said would in fact be redesigned, and they're looking at a smaller design. Okay? The Mac Pro as it stands can be had as a tower or as a server config. And I think that for the smaller design, I think Apple's going to have something on here. They have an opportunity, okay? They have an opportunity. And what is that opportunity? Well, as you may or may not know, the Mac Mini is one of the systems they put the M1 in. I'm debating that for a secondary system in my summer house, though I have not come to a full conclusion yet. It's just a very, very early stage, very early thoughts, right? So a lot of people are thinking, well, maybe why not turn the Mac Pro into a Mac Mini of sorts? Yes and no. The Mac Mini doesn't have enough room inside, even with the M1. I don't think it has enough room for the adequate cooling that would be needed for some of these higher end components. I mean, the Mac Pro, if you max it out, it costs $50,000. Okay, $50,000. That's as much as a luxury car for a computer, right? The Mac Pro, excuse me, in its current iteration, latest iteration, Mac Pro has always been a developer studio or a creative studio's dream system, right? Their target, people like Pixar and DreamWorks, the animation studios, right? That's who the Mac Pro is targeted for. Scientists who have a lot of mission critical stuff that requires a lot of computing power to analyze the data, right? So that's who the Mac Pro is targeted for. So I don't think the Mac Mini necessarily has enough oomph on the inside. Even if you could stuff those components in, I don't think it would have the necessary thermal characteristics. But I do know something that might.
The time is now 4 p.m.
Some of you who have been followers of Apple for the last 20 years, as I have been, might recognize this. I don't think I ever saw it in person. Maybe once or twice. It's hard to remember. Well, for those of you who cannot see, what I'm showing is a PowerMac G4 Cube, or as Steve Jobs referred to it as, more affectionately, the G4 Cube. This thing was a sales disaster. And you could not get standard off-the-shelf components because of the way it was shaped, right? And the price premium was just nuts compared to what you got with the standard Mac Pro or PowerMac Tower, PowerMac G4 Tower. And needless to say, it was an absolute flop. Yet at the same time, on the opposite end of the coin, you have this thing sitting in the Museum of Modern Art. And I'm not exaggerating. That's how beautiful this thing was. Even today, if you take a look at it, for those of you who cannot see it, it's a translucent plastic cube with an aluminum enclosure on the inside. The system was designed to be absolutely fanless, okay? The system was designed to cram the power of a G4 into something the size of an iMac, right? Here's the thing. If we fast forward, you know how they say things are ahead of their time? If we fast forward 20 years, or in this case, it'll probably be 22 years, right? Because this Mac, the PowerMac G4 Cube, came out in 2000. Supposedly, the Mac Pro, its replacement, will be ready in 2022. Rumor says smaller design. I'm thinking this might be an opportunity to resurrect the Cube. And a lot of people are wondering, well, how is this going to go? Well, remember, this would be a total redesign from the ground up. And let me just speak personally for a second, because I love, tinkering around. I love watching videos of people tinkering around with the technology, inserting RAM, CPU swap outs, all that sort of stuff. But I've honestly been a bit afraid to carry out those things myself, particularly when it comes to involving very, very tiny components. I would probably need a video magnifier, and I mean like a full-on desktop CCTV type system to effectively do something like that. And having to dig down inside, deep into a system, is just not something that I'm comfortable doing myself. So I'm thinking with the Mac Pro Cube, as I'm going to start calling it, I'm thinking with the Mac Pro Cube we might be able to innovate here. And when I say we, I mean Apple. I don't work for Apple by any means. I'm just saying that I think they have a chance to do something here, and I think that something is, rather than having to worry about pins and tiny screws and screwing something up because it's so fragile, you would have rectangular bays. And those rectangular bays could come out of the system. And you just put in the RAM, the hard drive, whatever you need into those bays. The only item that would remain would be the power supply and the processor, whatever they call it, the M3X or whatever. And that's it. Everything else could be hot. Well, I don't know if necessarily hot swappable, but swappable. And you're thinking, well, how would you do it? I'm thinking magnets. The idea basically being that you would put the standardized off-the-shelf component into a cradle, and then you would put the cradle into the system, right? That way, if you want to swap something out, you don't need to worry about lifting something 50 pounds off the floor onto a desk and turning it over and having to wonder, gee, did I scratch something? Instead, what we could do is, for those of you who remember the size of a slot load optical drive, particularly the super drive, if you have sort of like a rectangular area surrounding that, maybe that could be the size of one of these magnetic module bays, and you combine that with the whole perimeter of the G4 Cube. In this example, I think we could get at least 10 components in here, and what I'm thinking is, we send the connections out the back, not the bottom, because for those of you who do not know, the PowerMac G4 sent its connections out the bottom for design's sake. That I honestly didn't like. That's the one thing I didn't catch. If I did see it earlier on, I remember, like I said, I don't remember if I did. But if I did, I don't think I saw that cabling, because back then my vision was considerably worse. But I did see videos of it since, and the cabling, having to connect underneath the system, I don't like that at all, because I do have to wonder how long the cables would last. So what I'm thinking is connect through the back along the power supply, and each bay would have the necessary connectors like USB-C, your graphics, that sort of thing. And if I'm correct, in this estimate here, I'm just moving my arrow along the photo, just trying to mentally count in my head. I'm thinking that we could have a system with up to 10 expansion slots, right? And with the power of the M1, being able to much more easily handle the thermals than the PowerMac G4 Cube could, excuse me, because even though the system was designed to be fanless and you had the air coming out at the top, you still had everything kind of crammed in there, right? So it seems to me like it would run pretty hot anyway. So what I'm thinking is, if you have each bay divided off into its own thermal zone, and again have the connections come out the back, and the power supply would remain in the system at all times, but the power supply could, you could option it up. And again, this is just me just rambling, okay? If you're doing a mission control, if you're doing a mission critical application, particularly one that requires you to still be working, say during a power outage, I would say build in a PSU, and that stands for power supply unit for those who do not know, which is basically a big battery for desktop systems. I would say build in a PSU into the Mac Pro Cube's power supply, and make that available instead of the wheels, because realistically speaking, you wouldn't need wheels on a system that tiny. And I think that particularly if you're living in a studio apartment and you are doing professional work, but you're hard up for space, I mean, yes, the Mac Mini can do a fair bit, and for a lot of people, yes, it will work. But what if you are in a position where you need to work from home, but you're working with absolute top of the top of the top of the top of the top, absolute sky high, kind of work, stuff that will require the additional power of the Mac Pro. It'd be nice to have a system that had that power in a smaller, compact form factor. And as I said before, the Mac Mini is great, but I don't think it'd be enough for the absolute highest demanding customer. So I do think that there would be room. I think there would be room in the lineup for a Power Mac, for a Mac Pro Cube. And I just think that, again, these are just examples, but I think there's definitely room for Apple to innovate with this new design. But what do you think? Bring back the Cube? The one thing we do know, or at least we feel we know, is that we're going to get a much smaller design than what we do now. Possibly maybe 1/4 the size, but the overall look would be the same. It's the latest rumor as of December 2020. What do you guys think? Do you think they should try to bring back the Cube? Do you think they should try for something else? What do you think? Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.